Don't lie to me. I saw you kissing.
It was just once.
I always believed my life was a perfectly tuned mechanism. Working in cybersecurity taught me one thing. Every system has a vulnerability. You can install the most expensive firewalls, but if someone inside leaves the door open, all your protection is worthless. I didn't know that the doors of my home weren't just open. They had been taken off their hinges. My name is Tommy. My wife, Melinda, was the kind of woman for whom men quit smoking, start making millions, and build houses with panoramic windows. We had been together for 8 years. Our marriage seemed like a fortress. No loud scandals, no drama. Just quiet evenings and shared plans for the future. Everything changed on Thursday. That was the day my world began to fall apart into pixels. I was supposed to return from a conference in Chicago on Friday, but the meeting ended 24 hours early. Instead of calling to warn her, I decided to do what men do in bad jokes, arrive without notice. I bought her favorite peonies and a bottle of expensive wine. I was already imagining her surprised and happy face. When I pulled up to our house, it was 8 in the evening. Light was on only in the bedroom on the second floor. I quietly opened the door with my own key, trying not to make noise. But as soon as I crossed the threshold, something seemed strange to me. There was some foreign, heavy aroma in the house. It wasn't the smell of our food or Melinda's perfume. It was the smell of men's deodorant, sharp, cheap, with notes of pine. I stopped in the hallway. The sound of water from the bathroom upstairs indicated that Melinda was in the shower. I put the flowers on the nightstand and noticed her phone. It was lying on the mirrored console, and the screen kept flashing with messages. We never spied on each other. We had a policy of complete trust. But this pine deodorant in the air made my insides clench. I picked up the phone. It was unlocked. Melinda had just been reading something before going to the shower. A message from the contact management. You forgot your silver earring in room 402. I took it. Be more careful next time, Mel. Ted missed you 5 minutes after you left. My heart didn't just beat faster. It seemed to skip several beats and then exploded. Ted was my former colleague. A year ago, he was fired for minor reporting fraud, and I foolishly helped him find a new job by vouching for him. I thought I was doing a good deed. It turned out I had personally let the wolf into my home. I quickly scrolled up through the correspondence. There were no romantic verses. There was business. Dirty, brutal business. Melinda. Tommy transferred the last tranche to the firm's operating account. $150,000. Now we have enough capital to move it offshore and declare bankruptcy. Luke says the papers will be ready in 2 weeks. My husband will sign everything without looking. He's too busy with his security to notice the real threat under his nose. Management, Ted, you're a genius, baby. As soon as he goes bankrupt, we'll take the money and leave. He'll be left with debts to suppliers, and we'll have a new life. I love you. I heard the water sound stop. I only had a few seconds. I put the phone back in its place, my heart pounding somewhere in my ears. I couldn't go out to her now. I couldn't just scream. If I revealed myself now, they would simply speed up the process, and I would be left with nothing, without a wife, without money, and with huge debts. I quietly left the house, closed the door, and sat in the car, which was parked around the corner. I sat in the darkness, looking at the windows of our bedroom, and felt every cell that had once loved this woman dying inside me. Melinda wasn't just cheating on me physically. She was preparing my financial execution. She was using our joint company Terraform Designs, which we had been building for 8 years, as a tool for my destruction. I took out my work laptop. My fingers automatically began entering commands. As a security specialist, I had access to many things Melinda didn't even suspect. I logged into our smart home management system. The first thing I did was activate the hidden microphones on the kitchen appliances, which were usually used for voice control but could work in continuous listening mode. Then I connected to the camera in our garage. I saw Melinda leave the house 5 minutes later. She was in a light dress, her hair still wet. She looked so calm, so mine. She got in her Tesla and drove off. I tracked her GPS. She was driving to the Grand Horizon Hotel. To Ted. I didn't follow her. I knew what I would see there. Instead, I drove to the office. I needed to check the accounts. If she said I would sign everything without looking, it meant she had already prepared some documents. The office was empty and cold. I logged into the accounting system. Sophia, as she called herself in the business world, had created a series of fictitious contracts for the supply of building materials with the firm V-Invest. I quickly checked the beneficiaries of this firm. Oliver, no, Ted Banse. She was draining money from our firm under the guise of paying for goods that didn't exist. Over the past 3 months, she had withdrawn almost $400,000. This was money we had been saving for business expansion. This was our retirement savings. I felt cold fury begin to replace despair. She thought I was too busy with my security. Well, she was right. I was very busy, and now I was going to create a security system for her and Ted from which there would be no exit. I called Edward. He was my lawyer and the person who knew more about financial fraud than anyone else in this city. Edward, I need a full audit of my company, but quietly, so my wife doesn't find out. And I need to know everything about Ted Vance. Every debt he has, every unpaid fine. Tommy? What happened? Edward's voice was worried. My system has crashed, Edward, and I'm going to reboot it. I closed the laptop. A long week lay ahead. I had to return home, smile at Melinda, kiss her, and pretend nothing happened while Edward prepared the papers and I prepared a digital news. The next morning I returned home at 8, as if just from the airport. Melinda was already in the kitchen, making coffee and looking like the embodiment of domestic comfort. She was wearing my old sweater, and her hair was gathered in a careless bun. If I hadn't seen that correspondence, I would have approached her now and hugged her, feeling like the happiest person in the world. Tommy, you're already home. She smiled sincerely and ran up to me, hugging my neck. She smelled of the same hotel soap and a barely perceptible pine scent. I almost felt sick, but I held the mask. Working in security taught me to control micro-expressions. Yes, honey. Finished early. Missed you terribly. I kissed her on the forehead. Every millimeter of my skin screamed with disgust. Throughout breakfast, she chattered about how her days had gone. She talked about boring meetings and logistics problems while I looked at her thin fingers holding the phone. With those same fingers, she had written to Ted yesterday that I was too busy with my security. By the way, Tommy, she lowered her eyes to the plate, trying to make her voice sound casual. Luke, our corporate lawyer, prepared documents for the restructuring of Terraform. Just formalities there, transferring some assets for tax optimization. He'll bring them on Monday. You'll sign, right? There it was. The final blow. She wanted me to sign my own death sentence. Of course, sunshine. Give them to me when they're ready. I'll review and sign. I smiled at her with my kindest smile. I trust you. After breakfast, I drove to Edward's office. We locked ourselves in his office, and he laid out the first investigation results on the table. Tommy, everything is worse than we thought. Your wife isn't just withdrawing money. She initiated an audit through Ted's front company. They're creating artificial debt. If you sign those papers on Monday, you'll become personally liable for loans they've already moved offshore. You'll lose not only the company, but also the house, car, and will owe the bank about $2 million. I was silent. Cold anger pulsed in my temples. But there's one detail, Edward continued. Nora, Melinda's sister. She works in Terraform's accounting department. She signed some of the invoices as a witness. Judging by everything, she's scared. She's not a sociopath like your wife. She's just a weak person Melinda dragged into this. I knew what to do. Nora had always been the good girl who was afraid even of a parking ticket. She was the weak link in their perfect chain. I invited Nora to lunch at a small cafe on the outskirts. She came pale, constantly looking around. Tommy, did something happen? Why couldn't we meet at the office? Nora, I know about Ted, and I know about V-Invest. I said this as calmly as possible, looking directly into her eyes. She dropped her fork. The sound of metal on ceramic seemed like a gunshot. I don't understand what you're. Nora, listen to me very carefully. Edward is now preparing a statement to the prosecutor's office about financial fraud and conspiracy. Your signature is on 15 fictitious acts. This is real prison time, from 5 to 8 years in a general regime colony. Melinda plans to flee to Portugal with Ted. Do you really think she'll take you with her? Or that she'll send you care packages in prison? Nora began to tremble. Her eyes filled with tears. She said it was just a game with taxes, that no one would get hurt. I'll get hurt, Nora, but I'm giving you a chance. If you give me the originals of the documents that Melinda is hiding in your family archive at your mother's old house right now, and if you agree to testify, I'll remove your name from the list of accused. Edward will make it so you'll pass as a witness who assisted with the investigation. Melinda will kill me, she whispered. Melinda won't have time for you. She'll be too busy looking for a good lawyer, although with the evidence I have, no one will help her. That evening I met Nora at their mother's old house. She brought me a folder. There were original contracts, real statements that Melinda had been hiding from me, and, most importantly, a handwritten plan for Tommy's liquidation, where Melinda had written out the schedule for withdrawing money and the dates of my bankruptcy in her own hand. I returned home late. Melinda was already asleep. I sat in the study and began scanning the documents. Suddenly, my monitor came alive. It was the listening system in the kitchen. Melinda had woken up and gone to drink water. She was talking to someone on the phone. Ted, calm down. He doesn't know anything. He brought me flowers today and kissed me like a puppy. On Monday, he'll sign everything, and we're free. Nora? Nora will do whatever I tell her. She's afraid of me. Yes, darling. I love you too. Soon it will all be over. Don't forget to subscribe to this channel and click like if you enjoy this story. I always read your comments and analyze which stories you like best so that I can create better stories. Thank you. I will continue the story. I turned off the sound. Soon it will all be over, Melinda, but not at all the way you imagine. Saturday passed in an atmosphere of terrible calm. It was that kind of silence that happens before a tsunami, when the water recedes far from the shore, exposing the dirty bottom. Melinda suggested going to the countryside, to our dacha, to rest from the stress before an important week. I agreed. I knew she needed this for an alibi. While we were there, Ted and Luke were supposed to complete the re-registration of the last liquid assets to dummy accounts. I played the role of a loving husband flawlessly. We walked through the forest. I held her hand, feeling cold fury every time she smiled at me. In the evening, we sat by the fireplace. Melinda put down her phone and laid her head on my shoulder. Tommy, have you ever thought about just dropping everything? She asked in a quiet, almost tender voice. Selling the business, going somewhere in Europe, living in a small house by the sea. You know, I love my work, I replied, looking at the fire. But if that's what you want, I'll do it for us. Just first we need to complete this restructuring you were talking about. Yes, restructuring, she closed her eyes. It will solve all our problems. Do you trust me? This moment was the peak of her cynicism. She wanted to get my yes, not just on paper, but in my soul. She wanted me to bless my own destruction myself. More than anyone in the world, I said. While she slept, I went out to the veranda with my laptop. I needed to know more about Ted. If Melinda was the architect of this scheme, then Ted was her weak executor. I hacked his personal email through a vulnerability in his cloud storage. What I found made me smile for the first time in these 3 days. Ted Vance wasn't just a lover. He was a serial scammer. In his email was correspondence with some Sharon, a woman from another city. Ted is Sharon. One more week, baby. This stupid Melinda has almost extracted money from her husband. She thinks we're flying to Portugal together. Naive. As soon as the tranche hits my account, I'll transfer it to you and we'll disappear. Let her sort out the lawsuits from banks and police herself. She thinks she's the smartest, but she's just my ticket to a comfortable life. This was perfect. The spiders in the jar were already eating each other before I closed the lid. Melinda was betraying me, and Ted was betraying Melinda. I downloaded all this correspondence. Now, I had a weapon that would destroy their relationship from within when the time came. On Sunday evening, we returned to the city. I saw Melinda getting nervous. She constantly checked her phone, waiting for a signal from Luke. I was waiting for a message from Edward. It came at 10 p.m. Everything's ready. Accounts are under surveillance. The tax office received an anonymous tip about V-Invest, but they won't intervene until your signal. Tomorrow at 9 in the morning, the big game. I lay in bed next to the woman who was planning to leave me on the street. I looked at the ceiling and calculated every step. On Monday, she would bring the documents. She would be sweet. She would bring coffee right to my office. She would put down the papers and say, "Just sign here and here, dear." I decided I wouldn't make a scene. I wouldn't scream. I would act like a surgeon. At 3 in the morning, Melinda woke up. I heard her quietly leave the room. I activated the listening device in the kitchen. "Yes, Luke," she whispered. "Everything's on track. He'll sign at 9. Is Ted already at the bank?" "Good. Make sure the transfer goes instantly. I want us to be at the airport by evening." "Yes, I know about the risks. But Tommy will never suspect the forged reports. He only sees what he wants to see." She returned to bed. I pretended to sleep. Her breathing was calm. She was confident in her victory. She considered me a predictable piece of code that she had easily rewritten for her needs. But she forgot the main rule of cybersecurity. If a hacker thinks he's already inside the system, it means the system allowed him to think that, to lure him into a trap. Monday morning began with bright sunshine. Melinda was extremely energetic. She prepared my favorite breakfast, French toast. "Today is a big day for our firm," she said, pouring me juice. "A new start. Are you ready for change, Tommy?" "You can't even imagine how ready I am," I replied, looking at the clock. 60 minutes remained until her perfect world would begin to explode segment by segment. At 9 in the morning, my home office resembled a theater stage. The sun broke through the blinds, drawing even stripes on the floor that looked like bars. I sat behind a massive oak table, in front of monitors that continued to silently collect data. Melinda entered with a soft gait, holding 2 cups of coffee and a thick leatherette folder in her hands. She was dressed in a business suit, the image of a successful businesswoman who has everything under control. "Coffee for my genius." She placed the cup next to me and gently ran her hand over my shoulder. "Luke just sent the final versions of the documents. He said he checked everything 3 times. All that's needed are your signatures on the pages where the stickers are." She placed the folder in front of me. I smelled glue and fresh printing. These were documents for the transfer of my personal intellectual property rights to our company, to the firm V-Invest, and a personal guarantee agreement for loans that were already overdue. "Tommy," she leaned over, and her hair tickled my cheek. "As soon as we finish this, we can go on vacation. Just you and me. No servers, no codes." I opened the folder. Page by page, my financial death was laid out there. I saw clauses that Melinda considered too complex for my code-busy mind. Clauses that made me a debtor for life. "You know, Melinda," I slowly twirled the pen in my hands. "I was looking at our old photos this morning. Remember our first year? We had nothing but a rented apartment and 2 old laptops. We trusted each other absolutely." She froze for a moment. Something like irritation flashed in her eyes, but she quickly hid it under a mask of tenderness. "Of course I remember. That's exactly why I'm doing this. To bring back that lightness. So we don't have to worry about money anymore. Just sign, Tommy. We need to send the scans to Luke by 10. I looked at the clock. 9:15. At this moment, Ted was supposed to be at the bank, waiting for confirmation of a transaction that would never happen. "Are you sure this is the best option for us?" I asked, giving her one last chance to stop. This was my internal test for remnants of her humanity. "Absolutely," she said without any hesitation. "Sign." I picked up the pen. My hand didn't tremble, but instead of my usual signature, I put a complex flourish that I only use for internal system tests. This signature automatically made the document invalid at my bank due to non-compliance with the sample, but looked genuine to a layperson. I signed all 8 pages. Melinda almost snatched the folder from my hands. Her eyes flashed feverishly. "Thank you, dear. I'll scan them in the living room right now. Rest. You look tired today." She almost ran out of the office. As soon as the door closed, I pressed a key combination on the keyboard. The screen split into 4 parts. First part, camera in the living room. I saw Melinda with trembling hands photographing the documents and sending them via Messenger. Second part, Luke's desktop. Thanks to the virus I implanted in his system through an urgent letter from the tax office, I saw everything he was doing. He was just receiving these photos and preparing the final command for the money transfer. Third part, Ted's geolocation. He was at the Union Bank branch, and on the fourth part of the screen was a chat with Edward. Me. She sent them. Begin. I turned on the sound in the living room. Melinda was calling Ted. "Ted, I have everything." He signed. She almost screamed with joy, forgetting that I could hear. "Yes." The idiot didn't even read. "Start the transfer. I'm already packing my suitcase. Meet at the airport in 3 hours." I heard footsteps. She was going upstairs to our bedroom. Through the smart speaker camera, I saw her pulling out from under the bed a suitcase she had been hiding there for several days. She was throwing in her best things, jewelry, documents. I calmly left the office and stopped in the bedroom doorway. "Going somewhere, Melinda?" I asked in an even voice. She jumped, almost dropping a box of valuables. Her face contorted for a moment, but she instantly tried to regain control. "Oh, Tommy, you scared me. I just decided to start packing for our vacation. You said we'd go as soon as we sign everything." "Portugal is a wonderful country this time of year," I said, leaning against the doorframe. "But there's one problem. Ted is flying alone." Melinda froze with a dress in her hands. Her eyes narrowed. What are you talking about? What Ted?" "Tommy, you've been overworking again. You're having hallucinations." I took out my phone and pressed play. Melinda's last night's conversation with Ted about the idiot who will sign everything rang out in the room. Then I switched to the recording of Ted's correspondence with Sharon, where he promised to dump Melinda as soon as he got the money. Melinda's face changed colors, from pale marble to bright red. She threw the dress on the floor. You spied on me?" she hissed, and there wasn't a drop of tenderness left in her voice. Only pure disgust. "But I don't care. You already signed the papers. The money is already going to the account. You're bankrupt, Tommy. You're nobody. I'll take everything, and you'll rot in courts for the rest of your life." She grabbed her phone to call Luke, but her screen was blocked by a red message. "Access denied. Financial operations suspended. Your signature on the documents isn't valid, Melinda. It was a test. And Luke is very busy right now. Edward and bank control representatives are just entering his office. By the way, your VInvest account is also frozen. There's exactly $0 there now." Melinda threw the phone at the wall. She looked like a cornered animal. "This isn't the end. I'm your wife. I have a right to half the property." "Not when I have Nora's testimony and the originals of your forged reports." I came closer. "You're not just a traitor, Melinda. You're a failed hacker. You try to break into a system that created you." At that moment, her other, hidden phone in her purse rang. It was Ted. I'll let her answer. Ted, what's happening there?" she screamed. "Mel, the money's blocked." Ted's voice was full of panic. "There's police at the branch. They're asking about VInvest. I'm getting out of here. Don't call me anymore. You ruined everything." He hung up. Melinda slowly sank onto the bed, staring into space. Her entire complex, multi-month plan had crumbled in 10 minutes. "And now," I said, taking another folder from my pocket, "let's talk about how you'll disappear from my life without unnecessary noise." Melinda sat on the edge of our bed, surrounded by half-empty suitcases. She didn't look like a victim, but like a broken machine still trying to find a short circuit in the system. I felt no pity for her. When you see a person with whom you've shared breakfast for 8 years cold-bloodedly discussing your financial execution, something in you burns out forever. You think you're so smart, Tommy. She finally raised her head. Her eyes were dry and angry. You're just a sociopath with a laptop. You never knew how to love. You only saw me as another app for your smart home. Ted at least saw me as a woman. Ted saw you as a wallet, Melinda, and judging by how quickly he dumped you at the bank branch, he doesn't even remember your name anymore. I left the bedroom, leaving her alone with her collapse. I needed to finish things with Luke. This lawyer was the heart of their scheme. Without his stamps and knowledge of legal loopholes, Melinda would never have been able to get so close to my assets. I got in my car and drove to Edward's office. When I entered, Edward was just drinking coffee, looking at his tablet screen. He looked satisfied. Luke turned out to be a coward, Tommy, Edward said without even greeting me. As soon as we and the auditors entered his office and presented recordings of his conversations with Ted, he started singing like a canary. He's already signed a confession that Melinda initiated the forgery of Terraform reports. He's trying to bargain for house arrest in exchange for full access to Ted's offshore accounts. And Nora? I asked. Nora is safe. She brought the originals of the documents about the fictitious bankruptcy. It was the last nail in the coffin of their scheme. Melinda is now not just a traitor. She's the main suspect in a corporate fraud case. But I didn't want to see her behind bars. Not because I loved her, but because a trial would drag my business into a swamp for years. I wanted quick surgical removal. I returned home 2 hours later. Melinda was still in the bedroom. She wasn't crying or angry anymore. She was just sitting on the floor, looking at her broken phone. I have a proposal, Melinda. I threw a thin blue folder on the bed. This is a divorce agreement by mutual consent. There's also an appendix about full transfer of your share in Terraform to me. You renounce claims to the house, car, and all bank accounts. She laughed hoarsely. And what do I get in return? The opportunity to leave with one suitcase. You get freedom. In the second folder is a police report that Edward has already prepared. Your signatures are there, recordings of your conversations with Ted, and Nora's testimony. If you sign the divorce agreement now, Edward burns these documents. If not, police will be here in 30 minutes. And believe me, with your debts to V-Invest, which are now your personal problem, you won't be able to afford even the worst lawyer. Melinda took the documents. She read them slowly, her lips repeating the legal terms. Her hand was shaking. She understood this wasn't a choice. This was capitulation. Nora, she really betrayed me, she whispered. Nora chose life without prison. You should do the same. At that moment, there was noise in the living room. Someone was knocking on the door. It was Sharon, the same woman Ted wrote about in his letters. I let her in. Melinda came down to the first floor, holding the folder in her hands. Sharon was tall, a confident woman. She looked at Melinda with a mixture of pity and contempt. So you're that same Mel, Sharon said. Ted told me you're just a crazy ex who's stalking him and offering your husband's money so he'll be with you. He sent me all your messages. This was the final blow to Melinda's ego. To see the woman to whom Ted forwarded her intimate confessions as proof of his desirability. Melinda turned so pale it seemed she would faint now. He said he loved me, she barely whispered. He says that to everyone who has access to a bank account. Sharon turned to me. Thanks for the information, Tommy. My lawyer is already dealing with his business in our city. When Sharon left, the house fell into that same silence from which everything began. Only now, it was the silence of emptiness. Melinda approached the table, took my pen, the same one I had used this morning to put the test signature, and quickly signed all pages of the divorce agreement. I hate you, Tommy, she said, throwing the pen on the table. I hate you for always being right. That's not hatred, Melinda. That's just the consequence of your own code. Every error sooner or later leads to system crash. You were my biggest mistake, and I just fixed it. Melinda didn't pack for long. She understood. Every minute spent in this house was a minute when I could change my mind and press the send button on the prosecutor's report. She chaotically threw things into the suitcase, and the sound of the zipper seemed to me like the sound of final credits in a very bad movie. I stood by the window in the living room, watching the sun slowly set below the horizon. The house we had chosen together, which we filled with furniture and memories, suddenly became just a box of concrete and glass. No feelings, just the technical necessity to complete the process of deleting damaged files. Melinda came downstairs with a suitcase. She had already changed from the business suit to regular jeans and a hoodie. Without makeup and a confident smile, she looked like an ordinary passerby I would never have noticed in a crowd. "Where will you go?" I asked without turning my head. This wasn't concern. This was checking how far she was planning to disappear. "To Nora's. And then, I don't know. The world is big." She stopped at the door, hesitating for a moment. "Will you really burn the documents?" "Edward already received a scan of your signature on the divorce. The originals of the report will be destroyed in an hour. But remember, Melinda, if I see your digital trace near my accounts even once more or hear that you're trying to contact my clients, we'll return to the conversation about prison." She nodded, pushed the door, and went out. I didn't follow her with my gaze to the car. I heard the engine start, gravel crunching on the driveway, and finally absolute silence fell. The first thing I did was take out my phone. "Edward," she left. "Start the procedure for full change of corporate rights. And call the cleaning service for tomorrow. I want there to be not even the smell of her perfume left here." The next 4 hours I spent at the computer. This was real digital disinfection. I deleted her access to all cloud storage, changed passwords on Terraform servers, canceled her corporate cards, and blocked her pass to the office. Then I moved to personal matters. I deleted all our joint photos from social networks and storage. I didn't want to leave myself pleasant memories because now I knew each of these memories was paid for by my own naivety. Around midnight, I received a notification. My monitoring system detected Ted's activity. He was trying to access one of our firm's hidden accounts from an IP address registered at a small motel near the border. I smiled. Ted was predictable to the point of boredom. He thought I had left a loophole accidentally. In fact, this account was a honeypot, a trap for hackers. As soon as he entered the password, his exact location and all his device data flew straight to the cybercrime department's email. Ted didn't have the mercy I gave Melinda. He was a foreign element that required complete isolation. I brewed myself strong tea and went out on the terrace. The phone vibrated again. A message from Nora. "She's with me. She's constantly crying and saying Ted isn't answering calls. Tommy, forgive me for all this. I didn't know it would go this far." I didn't respond. Nora had made her choice, and although she helped me, she was still part of that world of lies I had just destroyed. On Monday morning, I came to the Terraform office. My employees looked confused. They had already heard rumors about restructuring. I gathered everyone in the conference room. "Colleagues," my voice was calm and confident. "Mrs. Melinda no longer works for the company. She decided to pursue her own projects. From today, I take full operational management. We're starting an audit of every contract from the last 3 years. If any of you know about inaccuracies you were afraid to mention before, today is the last day you can come to my office and tell me about it without consequences." After the meeting, Luke came up to me. He looked like a person who hadn't slept for several days. His expensive jacket was wrinkled, and his hands were shaking. "Tommy, I was just doing my job. She was my client. You were an accomplice, Luke. And the only reason you're not in handcuffs right now is that you helped Edward find Ted's offshores. Pack your things. You have 10 minutes. If I see you in this part of town tomorrow, we'll review the terms of your cooperation." Luke didn't argue. He disappeared faster than Melinda. I returned to my office and sat in the chair. On the table stood a photo of Melinda in a frame. I took it, removed the picture, tore it into small pieces, and threw it in the trash. I left the frame empty. It reminded me that any form can be filled with emptiness if you don't check the content. My business was wounded but alive. My bank account was protected. My reputation remained clean. I won this war without firing a single shot and without making a single scene. But the hardest thing lay ahead, learning to trust the system again, knowing that the most dangerous virus can bear the name of a loved one. The first few days after Melinda left for Nora's were devoted to what Edward and I called financial quarantine. It wasn't just about getting divorced, but burning out any possibility of her legal return. Melinda was cunning, and I knew. As soon as the first shock passed, she would start looking for loopholes in our marriage to sue for at least part of the capital under the pretext of jointly acquired property. We gathered in Edward's office. On the table lay 3 large folders. This was the result of a complete audit of Terraform for the last 5 years. Tommy, look here. Edward pointed to a transaction chart. Melinda was confident her firm V-Invest was a perfect cover, but she made one mistake. She paid for Ted's apartment rent from our company's corporate account, marking it as software expenses. This is direct misappropriation of funds and commercial bribery. I looked at these numbers and felt cold gratitude for my own meticulousness. Every cent she spent on her secret life now became evidence against her. On Wednesday morning, Melinda called me. Her voice was no longer as confident as on the day she signed the papers. Tommy, I talked to a lawyer. She began, and I heard street noise in the background. He says that contract I signed to Home Under Pressure has no legal force. I have a right to a share in the house and to dividends from the last project. You can't just throw me out on the street with one suitcase. I calmly finished my coffee and turned on the speakerphone for Edward. Melinda, I said in the most level voice possible, your lawyer probably doesn't know that I now have invoices for your flights to Portugal, which you paid for from our firm's tax deductions. This is tax fraud. If you file a lawsuit for property division, Edward will immediately transfer this data to the tax inspection. Do you want half the house? Fine, but then you'll also get half of the prison sentence that Ted is facing. Are you ready to trade your freedom for a few square meters of concrete? A long pause dragged on at the other end. I heard her heavy breathing. She understood that I wasn't just defending myself. I was holding her on a short legal leash. You're a monster, she whispered. No, Melinda. I'm a person who knows how to count. And your debt to this family and business has long exceeded your share of the property. After that call, she no longer tried to dictate terms. Edward prepared a final settlement agreement. We met in a neutral place, a small notary office on the outskirts of town. Melinda arrived in sunglasses, though it was cloudy outside. She signed the papers silently, not looking at me. Each page she turned was another step toward her complete erasure from my life. Is that everything? She asked when the last signature was placed. Everything, Edward replied, taking the documents. From today, you officially have no relationship to Terraform or Mr. Tommy's personal assets. She got up and left without saying a word goodbye. I watched through the window as she got into Nora's old car. She was no longer part of my system. She was a deleted file that hadn't even made it to the trash. I erased it permanently with Shift+Delete. I returned to the office and called a board meeting. I needed to change the company structure so that no one would ever again have sole access to strategic accounts. From today, I announced, we're implementing a 2-factor authentication system for all financial operations. Not a single cent will leave the firm without confirmation from 2 independent departments. I saw my employees nodding. They understood. The rules of the game had changed. Terraform was no longer a family business built on trust. Now it was a fortress built on logic. In the evening, I returned to the empty house. The cleaning service had done a good job. There were no more traces of her things, her smells, her energy. I sat at my desk and opened an empty database for a new project. It was like a clean sheet of code. There was a lot of work ahead, but for the first time in many months, I knew that in this system there were no hidden bugs. A week after Melinda left the house, the first domino fell on Ted. My honeypot trap worked perfectly. Police detained him at the motel at the exact moment he was trying to transfer the remaining stolen funds to his other lover Sharon's account. It turned out Ted owed money not only to me. He was in debt to serious people, and his attempt to flee with someone else's money made him a target for everyone. When they led him away in handcuffs, he was shouting Melinda's name, trying to pin all the blame on her, but the recordings from my smart speaker were already in the prosecutor's hands as proof of his own initiative. Luke, the former lawyer, lost his license within 48 hours. Edward made sure Luke's professional ethics became topic number one in the city's legal community. His career wasn't just over, it was burned to ashes. He was forced to sell his office to pay fines and left the city, becoming an outcast in the profession to which he had dedicated his life. 3 months passed. I sat in my office, reviewing the final reports on the complete restoration of Terraform. We not only recovered what was lost, but also came out ahead thanks to the new transparent management system. Suddenly my phone vibrated. It was Nora. She sent me a brief message. Melinda is leaving. She signed a contract to work as an ordinary secretary in a small town up north. She asked me to tell you that. Well, no, it doesn't matter anymore. I deleted the message without even finishing reading it. Melinda was no longer a threat or a loved one to me. She was simply a stranger whose signature had once stood next to mine. I saw her for the last time near a supermarket the day before her departure. She was standing with a bag of groceries, waiting for a taxi. She was wearing an old raincoat and looked ordinary. She wasn't broken or aged. She was just a person who had made her choice and was now bearing its consequences. I simply drove past in my Tesla without slowing down. My system no longer recognized her as part of my world. Today my house is truly smart, but not because of sensors or cameras, but because I finally learned to distinguish real security from its illusion. I changed all the locks, not only on the doors but also in my head. The company is thriving. Edward became my full partner, and Nora got a chance to start over in another department under strict auditor supervision. I often look at the empty frame on my desk. It reminds me of the main lesson. Even the strongest wall can be destroyed from within if you allow the enemy to hold the keys. Now the keys are only with me. I'm Tommy, and I no longer believe in surprises. I believe in data, in logic, and in the fact that every virus, no matter how clever, will sooner or later be detected and removed. My code is clean. My life is free. The deletion process is complete. Thank you for watching this video. YouTube may no longer suggest my channel to you, so subscribe to it to receive new interesting stories. You will also help the channel grow and improve the quality of its content. The screen now displays a playlist with other interesting stories that you can listen to. You can also write in the comments what stories you would like to see on the channel.